Assuming we have all the information that we've got, because I know Brand did monthly bills, which means all the had all the seats and all those systems, and they're all somewhere. So we have all the trackers and shit and things like that.
It was.
So we have the schedule for the
We need to adjust, okay.
It's the same number, it's just.
There is a tax
Which is a
exception.
benefit.
But it doesn't schedule when you check what
Well, this one is construction, all the construction plans. So this is a
Except
analysis of
that
all
you
the
got
construction plans. All these things are specials, and that's why it's made.
These things, those,
all those plans that we set.
right. But not.
It's not for me. There was no set
Well, we'll go ahead and get started.
That's complicated.
Yeah, it is. I've been trained. They'll train me twice on how to push that button, so I'm trying. I think I got it on, so it'll laugh.
I saw it once. I didn't touch it.
I went to that council meeting, I was like, no, I'm not gonna see
How
it.
about that?
I guess we have a majority, right? I don't remember four of them. We'll get your talk.
Is it 7 members?
It's 7 members.
Yeah, you don't have to vote, okay. And have
There's a whole lot of action here, so it didn't go there on the wheel. All right, I'll call us to order. Now, I'm gonna go out of normal protocol and leave minutes and other sundry items until after the meeting, because there are some folks here that want to go to the jail session a little bit later, and Gary especially has to go to that session, and so we appreciate him coming in and speaking to us a little bit before the next event. So appreciate that. Jane mentioned that Gary was coming to town. We were able to communicate and talk a little bit about future things. This is nothing that we necessarily have to take action on, and probably won't take action on tonight, but food for thought so that we can prepare ourselves for the coming few years as we go along in this world of tax, the TIF district. Thank you, Gary. Yeah.
Well, why don't I just get a little bit of the background history, and this is Christina and Alicia, and they do our tax work for the firm. So that's why they're here, because they know a lot more about this than I do. I know enough to get us in trouble. But if you recall back in 2008 with the Chrysler Track project, there were a series of bonds that were issued. And when we issued those bonds, they were issued as tax-exempt bonds. So the benefit of that is the interest rates were lower than what they otherwise would have been, because the purchasers of the bonds simply didn't have to pay a tax on those bonds. So there's a tax benefit from that. The other piece of that has to do with the fact that there are certain rules of the Internal Revenue Service, and there's certain compliance things that have to be done. Years ago, and this goes back several years, the IRS, there's always these requirements, and they really didn't do a very good job kind of keeping track of things. But what happens when the federal government starts running out of money, they start increasing their enforcement procedures, and so now they're starting to look at this a lot more closely. So our firm has been pretty active in the last few years, working with all of our clients to make sure everyone was compliant, that everybody had everything done they're supposed to get done. So if there's an audit, you've got a way to demonstrate they were in compliance. I was in Chicago last week for a conference through the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, and one of the panels was from the IRS. And they shared with us the good news that one of their targeted areas of enforcement is an area called arbitrage. And arbitrage is simply a word that means the ability to take money at one rate and invest it at a different rate. It's not a bad word. It's probably a good word, actually, to be able to make money, but there are some limits. And so I'll let Christina kind of talk a little bit about what those limits are and what we have to do to comply. Or Alicia, I really don't care.
So, Alicia went through and reviewed the tax exempt debt issued how far back? I mean, 2004? I mean, did we go back and look at anything prior to this, or is this the only outstanding? So we've identified 4 different tax exempt issues, 3 of which there was a ban which was rolled over into another ban which was then paid off with a bond. So really, if you take those 3, and then there's another series, it's really like 2 issues. And we have to show, what we do is we look at the interest rate that you're paying on these tax exempt bonds, and we do a calculation to demonstrate that you have not earned interest earnings in excess of the rate in which you're paying interest. So by demonstrating that, we'll prepare a report that you'll have for your records in case of an examination by the IRS to show that you know that you didn't know anything. These calculations are due either at the 5-year date if they're still outstanding at that point in time, but if they've matured prior to that, then the calculations due at that time. But no less frequently than every 5 years that the bond issues are outstanding or that you have proceeds remaining. So if you had the proceeds spent down prior to that, then we could do a final calculation at that point in time. I don't know how much more detail you want.
My recollection is that all the money has now been spent. So, and there are no debt service reserve funds on any of the issues, so all bond proceeds is spent at this point in time. I'm pretty sure I'm right on that. And so assuming that's the case, this would be the final calculation. The one bond, if you remember, was given back to the county by Chrysler. And so it would be up to that point in time when the bond was given back, and that would be the final calculation. Now, the second bond for a bound, that other piece, when it was rolled over, the way that was structured, it was structured as just principal with no interest. And because it's not a tax exempt bond, there is no rebate calculation. There's nothing that has to be done with that bond issue. So it would just be the notes and then the bonds that the Series A and B for 2008, Series A and B. The other bond that was outstanding that I know many of you on the council, there was the edit bond, and that one needs to be done too. So we would ask the county commissioners to approve an agreement for that. But that's part of it too, but that one needs to be done too.
Nothing is actually submitted to the IRS unless it's found that money is owed. But in order, as Gary said, in order to demonstrate that you're aware that you don't owe money, a calculation is necessary to show that you haven't just assumed that to be the case, that you've actually verified it to be so.
So then, do we have a report that states that? And if they ask, we have it available, or do we just file it anyway?
You don't file it. We will prepare it, send you a copy, we'll have a copy, and upon examination, that can just be provided to the agent at that point in time if it were to come.
Okay, but it's not a definite that will be examined, but it's a possibility.
Right. It's a possibility.
Okay.
The issue, what happens if there was an audit, and they would say, can you show us what you have? And you say, water arbitrage. And then that starts setting off red flags. And then they start asking more and more questions, and it just creates it starts a life of its own. And if they do find something, if you've not gone and been proactive, they're far less lenient than if you've been proactive in that process.
So
if
they
you try-
expect us to be ready.
They expect you to be ready. So if you have good faith effort, you try to do the right thing, then and we really don't anticipate that there's going to be any issues. Although with the timing of it, there could always be an issue, but typically there's no arbitrage rebate. what happens if you have a bond at a low interest rate and then interest rates rise, then sometimes we can find situations where the interest you earn on the bonds exceeds the interest rate on the bond issue. And that's not a bad thing, because but then we have to make a calculation and say, well, how much excess did you earn? And then you actually have to write a check back to the Internal Revenue Service. And that's why they're interested in all this, because they're looking for checks back to the Internal Revenue Service.
I don't know what your involvement has been with some of the newer bond issues and the arbitrage compliance plans. I know some bond councils have been pretty active in putting together an arbitrage compliance plan when you're even issuing new debt to show that you have policies and procedures in place, that you are verifying that your tax exempt debt, that there's no liability on those issues, so.
And that's been a pretty recent phenomenon, development. Back in 2008, that really wasn't the case. We started seeing that happen in the last 2 to 3 years. They have this concept now called written tax compliance plan. So when you issue a tax-free bond, they expect you at the point of closing, they have a written document that says, we're going to be calculating our arbitrage at these dates, and this is the person responsible. And we recognize it can only be for public use, and it's limited private use, and this is what we're going to do to safeguard that, and they have a written document. And so when you get a letter from the IRS, it'll have it's like a fishing trip. You know, they're going to list, the first question is going to be, do you have a written tax compliance plan? If you check no, it goes, they don't go any further. You're on their list at that point. But that's something that started within the last few years. So I wouldn't really be worried about it at this point. But future issuances of the county, it's not a big deal. It's just a recognition that you understand what the tax rules are and you have a plan to comply with.
So it's due to do this every 5 years or every?
Well, in the case of these, of the bond anticipation notes, since those were refunded at that point in time, we need to do a calculation as of that date of the refunding for each.
Series A and B?
Remember there was a bond anticipation notice to pay for some of the
The
permanent
Chrysler,
costs.
is that the Chrysler?
Right, and then they were refinanced.
Right, so it's assuming that, I mean, if at that point in time that they were refinanced, that all the proceeds were spent, then that calculation would end on that issue.
No.
But if at that point in time they weren't, then it would continue on to the next issue.
Okay. So the Series A and B, how often we have to do this?
Since we think that this is the final,
Yes,
It's
if
all
the
bond.
proceeds are gone, it will be the
It'll be
final.
final.
if the bond proceeds are gone, it's the final, I'm pretty sure. That's my recollection. So that would be a final calculation. It'd be one calculation and then it'll be finished. Now, sometimes we fund debt service reserve accounts for some types of bond issues, but that's not what we're after.
And how about the edit bond, this being the final event too?
It'd be the final bit. If you disagree with me, speak out.
Well, that's with the assumption that the proceeds are spent.
They are.
Okay.
The only thing we have remaining in any of the redevelopment commission funds is some property tax.
Okay. Then I would say it's safe to say that these will be final calculations, so it won't be a continuing thing. We'll issue the reports, and that'll be final.
How long do you guys keep those on file in your office?
Until the bonds are paid off.
So the bonds paid off, okay. So we'll have a copy, we know, because we don't have to basically call home for an office for
The
us.
IRS rules.
And the auditor.
Everything that needs to be calculated.
3 years after the final maturity.
Actually, 3 years after the bonds are paid off.
Not a bad idea. Virgil.
Even if you want, and just say, don't ever throw anything away on this door.
I may not do that. I may not do that. I
Yeah.
may not be the.
You can count on
that.
that.
I'll just stay in the leash. There you go.
You might explain to the board that you have all those records because you were doing.
That's a good point. You know, we're kind of talking about what the cost would be and how much time is going to be required. We still need to kind of nail that down completely. But as you recall, all during construction, we provided the commission with reports. So we should have all the records we need, or almost all the records we need to do this. So we've got a lot of data in-house. We should expedite that process.
Excellent.
that something that you would anticipate having complete in 2012, next 2 months?
Probably 20. Yeah,
Probably early part of
13.
13.
Molly, if I may say, I know you said you didn't want to make a decision tonight, but, you know, I would like to offer that, my concern is that you don't know that any of you will be here in 2013. And I would hate for these people to have to come back and try to re-explain something to maybe a commission that doesn't have any background at all in anything that's gone on. So maybe if, when the full board is here, you want to think about this a little bit, that perhaps yet this year, you could at least make a decision on whether you want to do it.
Yeah, I think it's safe.
I think you need to give us something, yes, dollar-wise.
Oh,
So the number we're talking about right now is like $2,500 for each bond issue.
But for the RDC, it would just be the 2,500 because the edit bond will be the commissioners. So it's $2,500.
Actually, is that correct?
I think maybe the two series.
Two
Maybe
series.
2,500 and 2,500.
Right, because the bands will be rolled into that bond issue.
Oh, okay.
So the two bands and the one bond issue would be a total of 2,500, and then the other bond issue. So for the two, for everything it'd be 5,000.
Okay, sorry.
Not to exceed 5,000.
Okay, let's go back on that again.
Okay.
Okay, so the series A and B, when you say rolling band and all this, is that the A and B?
The
The
two,
Chrysler?
For everything that the redevelopment commission would be not to exceed 5,000.
And the commissioners
And then
potentially
commissioners,
25,000.
And then
2,500.
commissioners.
Okay, okay, so we're still leaving the edit bond in now.
because here we have the bands listed separately, and I just didn't want it to be interpreted that each band would be $2,500. But really, we look at the two bands that are rolled into that bond issue as one $2,500 fee.
Mechanics of what they'll need to do, they'll have to go through every transaction and put that into a computer program and go through some calculations, so it takes a little bit of time to.
Probably little chance that we earn more than we would have to return a check.
Very little chance. This is a compliance issue. I mean, this is a compliments of Internal Revenue Service.
So is that a dollar for dollar then? If we earn $30 more, do we send the IRS $30? Is it?
Well, they give you a little, they calculate the yield on the bonds, and then they give you a little cushion.
Okay.
Not much of a cushion.
I'm sure they would want a
Cushion
$30 check.
For a yield restriction.
But for rebate, it is truly a dollar. It's 100% tax.
Pretty much 100%. Okay,
Right.
thank you, that's better.
But in cases where, not to get too much in the details, but if you, the purpose of these rules is so that bond issues aren't issued for amounts in excess of what's needed, so that there's, or for periods of time that are longer than what's needed, and so they allow spending exceptions at certain points in time. If you've spent your proceeds and met these spending thresholds, then you would qualify for a spin down, and anything that you earn in excess of your rate on your bond issue, you can keep. And we will test that if there's an expectation at the issuance that that would be met, which would be outlined in what's called an arbitrage certificate. So we'll check those things to make sure that we're not overlooking some kind of spin down exception that's granted if you spend your proceeds quickly enough.
That's why they're here.
Appreciate it.
They can handle all this
Yeah.
stuff.
We don't get out much. We're too busy entering stuff.
Just wanted to come to Tipton.
Wow.
Okay. So the big, pretty simple proposal then, not to exceed $5,000 to get us in compliance and yeah, so we have the 5-year anniversary and that's the deadline that we need to work against.
Correct.
Well,
We'll be
except
coming
in the case of
One's
the
already
the Honda bond, actually the bands, we should have done a calculation at the time.
Okay.
I said we, a calculation should have been done at the time that they were paid off. And then the other bond issue, the other two, I would say the 5-year rate, even though the Honda was.
Chrysler.
I keep saying Honda, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry.
That's kind of Greensburg.
Yeah, we just talked about that. At that point in time, I think those would have been, the calculation could be done, since they were withdrawn, what, in 2 years, you said? That would have been done at that point in time, the calculation.
So from the board, then, we're gonna try to schedule a meeting for all the board.
Probably, so I'd like everybody else to know what's going on, and Tom said that he was fetching combine parts, and he may be late. And we've got Dennis, and we've also got Mike, right? Yeah. And Helen, Dennis. So I think I'd like to see everybody get a chance to understand what we're doing, but outside of that, we could do it for this year. That would give us the luxury too of doing your tax planning for us, or not tax planning, fund planning, as in make sure we get enough money if we want to. They give us the option to pay it with remnants of this year's funds or spill into next year.
Well, money will roll over, I mean, but.
Right. Unless we have anything else unforeseen. Does that sound okay with you folks? So before we get out of here, we'll set a date for a formal meeting and give everybody a little bit of time, maybe in a month out here or so, and get back together again and do some actual action on this piece of work. There's some time to share. Since we recorded this, we can share that with the other members, and we
Just let us know if you have any questions or make a professional.
appreciate that. Any other thoughts for the other law folks?
Are we gonna, this bill,
We can, yeah.
maybe we're gonna submit it for payment, or?
Yeah, well, I was just thinking about for them.
I have questions, someone.
Yeah, we do have a bill from Ball Associates. If there's any comments or,
Do you have an extra copy of that one?
yes, yeah, there you go. I printed one off.
I'll share with Bob.
Okay, all right, thank you for that.
He's still wet.
Jerry, on this, the financial development prep and the annual report for information provided to the auditor to check the fund balances, all these things, those were all done in direct bond payments or?
Typically what happens when the TIF revenues are collected and they need to be deposited, and there's always questions about where does the money go, what does it need to be spent for, how much money do we owe? So it's just miscellaneous questions that come up. Most of the work that's done has to do with, with the period of the time when we're doing the neutralization of the dates and preparing the forms for the DOJ.
Is that
So
quarterly,
quarterly,
or?
well, the neutralization is just once a year, and that's usually going on right about now, as soon as all the assessments are done. Earlier on in the year, there's questions typically around the settlement time.
Okay, but, so all of these that say financial development prep,
That's a category, when we click on this, forward, we have a time and balance system with 4-hour time, that's simply a generic. Let me see what you're doing. I can't.
it's like, I mean, I couldn't tell if it was
Yeah.
quarterly or what, because you see it over and over.
Yeah, this is just.
Then I couldn't tie anything beyond.
You're right. This is simply a category on our time and balance system, so whenever we go to enter time, we'll have choices like financial development preparation, and then an opportunity to explain exactly what we did in that area. And then,
Well, I know,
So
I mean,
that's
Jane has seen these in the past, and
That's-
she understands her
that's
billing
basically-
system, but Lonnie and the rest of us will be looking at them now.
That's a good question. No, it's just our time and balance system, and these are just general categories, and then below is a detailed description of what was done.
Okay, and then
So,
I noticed in June that there's a teleconference from Mike Klein, and then a meeting to discuss tip area. And I guess 2GM is you.
That would be me, yeah.
What, I mean, what, how do we just allow anyone, I'm not just saying, you know, commissioner or anybody to just accrue bills for us? As a
Well,
development?
if it is a question that relates to the TIF area and so forth, if it's an elected official, we'll generally answer the questions of all elected officials, and we need to put a time somewhere, so that's typically where it goes. So, if you'd rather us not do that, that's fine, we just need some direction on what to do. I'm literally elected to tell the county commissioner that I want to answer.
Well,
the
I
question.
agree. I mean, I don't have, I just am kind of surprised to see that it, I mean, it's built into the, you
We
know,
don't
the
have
RDC,
this.
and we've had these issues about, you know,
Well-
making sure everything was in order and that certain people knew what was being billed and, you know,
If you just give us direction on what you'd like to do, so we're happy to help, you know, whatever we can do. But, you know, when we get, questions asked and, you know, we have some, you know, good time.
And we had, when we organized this year, we really tried to get under a little bit of structure. And I know Monty kind of, as the chairman, takes care of the billing, the claims issues to make sure that we have some continuity there. But I think more than likely, if the commissioner calls, I would think it should be funded or paid out of edit, because if it's a development question in general, it probably ought to go that way, not so much this board, because commissioners can be on this board, I mean, that's acceptable, but if they're not, it'd be kind of like, I guess, the commissioner spending the sheriff's money for gas. I mean, is that the way it should happen, or it's still county money, but it's for accuracy and for, I guess, structure. If this board would say, how do we want our money spent? How do we follow that flow? Not that questions shouldn't be answered.
Right, I don't-
But I think the commissioner's issue probably is better suited for edit, and I don't know if the commissioners want to process it that way, but I mean, that's why the edit tax is there. They got full reign of that. That's probably more accurate, but just,
yeah, and I mean, I don't know, I mean, I don't know what this is about, but if they had anything pertaining to information we already had, then, you know, we're paying for
Double
it.
up.
I mean, you know, unless it's, I mean, I don't have a problem if they run it past the president, and you say, yeah, you know, that's fine. I mean, I just think that before we incur costs from, I mean, to me, that's like somebody just picking up and calling our county attorney, you know, and get a bill. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I have to agree with you, because I'm not gonna agree to pay the call, you know, that commissioner made. I mean, does anybody here know what it's about? I mean,
Yeah, you do.
I'm not sure I do. I'll be honest, that's
But they
Say 4 months
discussed it
ago.
with you because your initials are on here.
well, I'm sure I did, but I had no idea.
that's
what
back in
it
June.
was. I know. I'm not sure what they had for breakfast.
I don't think we should be paying it. I mean, if somebody wants to call, I mean, obviously answer the questions, but that's not.
Right, I
right.
don't have a problem with them calling and asking questions. I just think if it's gonna be charged off to, you know, to this board, I think that it ought to, I'm not saying it has to come to the full board, but I think at least the president ought to know that, I mean, how are you gonna approve this claim if there's things on there you have no idea what the charges are for? To know if we got those services or not, you know?
I could make this real easy. If there's issues between the two, just identify which ones, and I'll just deduct it from the bill, and I'll worry about it. That sounds fair. And that way it's not an issue for the redevelopment commission. We'll figure it out. I'll be honest, I'm not worried about it. Anything you have concern, like, just let me know, and we'll just adjust. That sounds fair.
Okay.
You're welcome. The older I get, the more easier it is.
Well, and we'll get some sort of protocol established, so we won't have to.
I know where everybody is, so I'm
Are we taking that off of this claim?
We can, or we
We can't, if it's up to you all.
have that discussion.
Well,
We are having the
I
discussion.
mean, at this point, I don't think it's our bill.
Okay.
I mean, you know, I have no problem with Gary talking to him, but I don't think it should be billed to us, it's not our business. Certainly not after the fact.
All right. Yeah, and we can put that in the motion here in a moment. If we want to do that. Do we have anything else for Gary?
Well, in
It's time here.
the same time, that same time frame, it has under the financial development prep, begin TIF area analysis. So is that what you did for us to determine when we did our resolution, that there is no?
If it was around June, that's
Okay.
what it would have been,
That's
because
Okay.
you have a requirement.
And with the TIF update, okay, so that would have had to do with our resolution that we passed, but there was no excess. Okay. Yeah, Gary doesn't know me that June 5th, the meeting discussed TIF area with Gary. I mean, I don't know if that had something to do with this board, or if that had something to do with the commission. I mean, I mean,
Legitimate question. I understand.
and the other one definitely has something to do with the commissioner, but,
And then the next two entries on the next page, though, still on that same date, the 5th and then the 6th, it's financial development. So it seems like.
They might all go
there's a good
together with
chance
that.
that all those, the three of those are together, just not the phone call.
that's the only one that I would.
What is a quarter of an hour?
I just sent you the bill.
Revised.
Well, if you folks are okay, I'd like to excuse Gary anyhow, because he needs to push
Yeah,
up
he
the
needs
dry
to go
central
to
there and
Is that
got
the-
another event.
Which one it is?
I think
Very-
You have one that can. Yeah, one for
Just, it just says one.
Gotcha. Right, I'll just send you the bill.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much for
much.
coming today, Gary. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you all.
Thanks, ladies.
Thanks for the tickets.
Oh,
These
yeah.
girls.
Thanks for that.
Enjoy.
It sounds like so Gary's gonna strike that from the bill. I think so, we can have discussion while we're vote here.
Buzz easier.
I would agree, it would be, it's not like I want to, if a commissioner calls us, we want to talk to them about it, it'd just be kind of nice to know that data is shared with the board, and then if it's important
At least
enough
you know.
for all of us, not to be nosy, but to be
Right,
informed.
right.
So,
And it
yeah,
says it is coming out this month.
true, because we are restricted with our fundraising capacities here.
Well, I guess if we're paying for it, we should know what it is.
Yeah, I think that's,
I don't think that's asking too much.
I agree. What would we like to, and just make a suggestion then, so Gary said all three of the,
No, he just
just the one, the
Yeah,
one in question there.
Just the
quarter
one
hour.
question for the teleconference.
Okay, so
He'll do that.
I guess maybe it'd be a good time we could just call to action, if we're comfortable, if we're comfortable with the remainder of the bill, that we could go ahead and look for a motion to pay with the exception of, and take it to a vote and process a little bit of business here, then if you're okay with that.
I think well, I think we can, just with that, amendment made.
Sure. There's no thing, that's not fair.
Well, was the arbitrage report something that the commission was advised about going in, that would be a requirement and an extra expense, or is this just something they
It's a
just?
relatively new thing. It's my understanding the IRS is just put that on their bucket list of things they're gonna really attack and be aggressive with.
Yeah, I've never heard of it.
New requirement after the fact.
Well, and like he said, now you have to have, you know, a document when you do your bonds that says you're gonna meet those requirements. So, you know, they've tightened down on it now.
I don't see how they can charge you to do a report like that if you didn't know about it going into the agreement.
Somewhere in all that bond stuff you sign that are hundreds of pages and pages and pages, there's probably one little blurb in there
Says they can do whatever.
that can probably
Well,
say something. I don't know.
But they wouldn't have to do it for us. We could get anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
But if the feds are now buckling down on that component because they're looking for money, and he said, you know, the enforcement issues coming up, then if we could get somebody to do it for us for free, we could. But what they're saying is they're probably the most logical because they've got our data, they processed it from day one.
Got all that stuff.
But when we issued the bonds, that really wasn't a high. I don't remember hearing anything about that, never.
Well, you should have been advised of that, I would think, if it were a requirement at that time, but if it's something new, I guess you would.
It's probably not new.
But
It's
that's,
probably been on the books for years.
It's a pretty good chunk of change on it.
Well, yeah, it is. I thought for 2,500, I thought, well, that's not too bad.
That was my thought.
I wouldn't even want to bury my head in all that paper for 2,500, then we said 5,000. And then another 2,500 for the commissioners, there's 7,500.
We want to go back to the issue at hand on the bill, and then we can talk more about the arbitrage.
Right.
Is that same thing,
Yeah.
since we got that?
I'd make a motion, we approve paying the bill with the corrected amount, deleting the claim that we're seeing on 6-5 teleconference, sent a call from my client with Malone for a quarter an hour.
I wasn't here, so I better not second.
Oh, I'll second.
All right. So we've got a motion and second then to pay the unbought bill that's presented dated. What's the date?
There's
Third.
17.
Yeah, it was dated 10/17, thank you, I was looking for that. Which current amount due is $2,200, but as Mr. Malone mentioned, that we would deduct the 1/4 hour in question on June 5th. Got a motion and a second, all in favor of that motion, respond with a voice vote of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. And we're really doing things backwards, but it's really to get things going, and that, originally, we didn't think we'd have much business, but
These guys.
shall we, while it's fresh in our minds, do we have any more arbitrage discussion, that we wish to have? I guess it's just an opinion, but I'm a really conservative guy when it comes to IRS. I'd like to think maybe somebody could do it cheaper, and I'd like to think maybe we shouldn't have to do it, but
We might not get
the
all
right
of
thing
it.
to do probably is to have them do it. I'm afraid that to try to task someone else with that would be a really challenging thing to try to do. And you know, all folks are top notch, and we pay a top notch bill for that, but I don't believe they're pulling our legs by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, they already have all the information and everything.
I think if it was something that had been an issue, they would have done it with those bonds. They would have got right on that. So I think it's probably they just want to make sure that they've got, you know, us covered and you covered.
I think so, and Gary tended to indicate that it was something that he got back from a seminar or a gathering where the IRS decided to announce that they were going to come down hard on this type of activity for compliance.
Jane, how does that work on that $10,000? If we don't spend it, because it doesn't sit there and calculate year after year after year, so if we don't spend it, does that go into pay anybody else? Where does that money go? What happens with it?
No, that.
It just rolls into the cash? So-
It's an individual fund that just,
So, yeah,
so that's really not an issue for us then as far as end of year spending versus new year spending. Okay,
Okay.
well, that's good
tell you that there will be another bill from Umball because you may have heard him say that they have not rolled over the assessed values. And so they have to do that base neutralization report. So there will be another bill for you this summer.
The bill for being here too.
No, I asked him because he was going to be in the county
Okay, good.
anyway.
Good.
That's why I was hoping that you could capitalize on his, by him being here. And I did
Good.
specifically ask him if he would come and talk to you for no charge. And he said,
But this is actually in July 30th, so if there's any activity they've done after that at all,
right.
we don't see.
And since you mentioned that, I'll go ahead and, if I may, I alluded to this in the email, that Gary asked me to review the claim because I had been working with Amanda in trying to get these bills paid and also with some of the reports. And so he wanted to make sure that it was correct, and I had told you in the email that I noticed that some charges were, I did not think that they were proper. And so there were 4 lines that were on the original claim that I did have removed. So the bill was much higher than what you saw. And I think that you need to establish a definite policy on who you want to be able to incur charges, because what has happened is you've placed, no, not you, but Umball has been placed in a very awkward situation. And it's not fair to them, because when people call them and ask for services, and then those services are rendered, and you guys know nothing about it. And so there was a fair amount of charges in September and October that I knew nothing about, that one commissioner and the economic development director did. And I'm very sorry to tell you that everything that they were told was information that we already have. So, and it was for a prospect, and it's very discouraging that we had all of the information. And Gary very generously just wrote it off. So, and then as you go forward with this new Lido, I think that you guys have to decide, if there's a new economic development director, are you going to give authority for that person to just call Umball? Are you going to, are they going to have an arrangement with Umball? Or how do you want to make this? Because otherwise, like I said, you're putting Umball in a very awkward position.
But if we did not have the Gertrude facility, if we did not have the redevelopment commission, if somebody was knocking on the door or had financial questions for the commissioners or the economic development organization, they're going to use edit money to make that happen. So why, just because we have this area, do we assume that we can just charge it off on that? Even if it's related to that,
Yeah. Well,
if it's development,
Mhm.
it needs to go.
And see, perhaps Umball didn't know, they didn't know where, they typically charge to the RDC.
Right.
But I'm sure that no one told them, hey, these charges we're incurring, you can send it to the VOC.
But the other issue, like, they're working on the jail and the courthouse renovation piece, Umball is.
Mhm.
They don't plan to send that
No,
out here.
correct.
So why, I would just say, I'd be really hesitant to allow basically anybody outside the RDC to be able to charge and claims against the RDC.
And I think that you could see that Gary said to you all,
I'll rebuild it.
you said,
Yeah.
but he said to you all, let me know, so
Yeah.
that I know.
Well, that's on Gary, that's on Umball. I mean, if they have a request for services and they provide service they're gonna charge for, they should notify whoever's requesting that service or ask them how they want that billed.
Pay it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And the reason Gary says you don't need to pay it is because he knows nobody authorized him to charge it to you. So
I agree.
you have no reason to pay it.
And if it does involve out there, at least call Monty, include this commission on the discussion.
But if Mike or the new EDC director or whoever, if Umball simply says, who do you want this service charged to? I'm sure they would say, well, charge it to the commissioners or charge it to the Lido or whatever. They're not gonna say,
Yeah.
charge it to the RDC.
But anything that happens in the TIF district, we've got the data on the financials. So to stir up a new report or create anything, if anybody comes to whoever and says, I want to have that factory and I want to build and do whatever, there is nothing that the RDC financially that we don't have.
Okay.
So we don't need Umball to recreate a new report for company A, B, or C. So,
But if I need that information, Brad, who do I go to?
well, you can come to the RDC first.
Call mine on the phone or wait till you have a meeting or what?
What kind of information do you?
Well, just what, a question that is a technical question that you would want.
Well, I would hope if they have a question, they wouldn't expect you to just hand it to them right there and then. They would give you a little time to get it together.
Yeah,
But
well, I'm just asking who do you contact if you need that kind of information,
I would say our
figures that you
president,
guys have.
our chair.
Do you contact the auditor, do you contact
But
Monty?
the other piece is, again, if it's development related, okay,
If
if,
you would be.
then the county and the city, if we're gonna have an economic development organization, they've got ways to make those things happen. They've got funds. So just because it happens to be within the TIF zone, doesn't mean that billing falls on this group.
No, that's my question. My question is,
He's asking.
Yeah.
I'm just asking if I want that
I
information,
think if he called the
instead of going to Umball, who do I go to?
find out, or
Well, I guess it depends what you're looking for.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got calculations that show what the bonds are out and what we're paying on them.
But when you say we've got it, who do I go to get that information? Monty, okay.
Or you ask the chairman to call a meeting of all the people that have the information or that know where to get the information. But what I'm saying is
I would
that
think the
call,
auditor would have that information.
well,
That's, what just said that, Ron. He just said, we're gonna ask for a little file drawer in there, and we're gonna have it just for us, and we're gonna tell them not to ever disband any of it. No, keep your hands off.
but the calls that were initiated to Umball, like Ron, when
They
you
will
said
have
that that's
everything at our
Umball's fault,
fingertips.
those calls that were initiated from the county to Umball, that was unfair because they were putting them in an awkward position, right? Because that information was available, and they knew it, they just didn't want to ask for it.
Yeah, but Umball can still say, well, who do you want this service charged to?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they can.
I mean, that's the way they should operate.
I mean, they expect it. But too, I don't know what kind of information they got or what they were asking. But if it's something that we did have, it'd be nice, and if it's something that Umball's already designed for us and we paid for it, it'd be nice if they'd say, well, but that's already been done. You need to go back to your local,
Yeah.
Well,
you know.
part of it was for the county council. Would you want to give Prospect a vacant building abatement? I don't think so.
Not at 100% and 50 the next year, I don't think so.
No.
So we spent money to find that out.
No, because he wrote it up. But anyway, if you guys establish a policy, I think that that'll take care of it. And then also, I think that you might want to either decide if one of you wants to do what I've been doing as far as making sure that the auditor is up on making the payments, just to check. And if that doesn't happen, then you'll probably be having more charges with unbottling. For someone has to just be double checking to make sure those things are happening.
At the right time.
Yeah. I mean, Greg's got a lot that he's doing, and I helped him with the Franklin Trust payment, and they're due at a lot of different times, and so, I did do that for this 2012, but, either someone on the board just kind of is reminding and helping, or either let Unlock do that, whatever you guys want to do. I don't think it'd be a whole lot more money.
What
but-
does Umball have to do to get ready for the payment? Do they have to do anything for us for the payment?
Now, they figure on the property taxes when they come in, and they figure, how they're divided. They take out, what is in the, what the agricultural land would have brought in, meaning agricultural. They would subtract that, they separate that out, they figure out what the bond payments are, and then anything that's left over, then they pay they separate that with Franklin Trust, and then it has to be made 2 times a year for the big bond payments, and 2 times a year for trust. But then this year, what happened was the property was reassessed, and so that made the payments to the trust different. So a lot of those calculations were different. So.
Do we have an agreement with them, a contract with them to do this
Mhm.
throughout the bond time, or is it just
Mhm.
year to year, or,
It's ongoing unless you cancel it. It's automatic renewal unless you cancel it.
so they do this 2 times a year?
Mhm.
And then they give the auditor their results, it says
Mhm.
on such and such date, you make this payment, on such and such.
And I don't know if you've met Matt Ackerley, he does a lot of calculations, but he's working with the auditor a lot, he's calling the auditor a lot. Like right now, he's pushing the auditor and the assessor to get those values rolled over, and most counties already have had that done, but we haven't yet.
So when he gives this report to the auditor and shows what they've come up with as the payments and when to make those, does he normally give a copy to the board too? Did you usually get a copy of that, or? Was it just the auditor?
Usually send it to the auditor, and the auditor sometimes would distribute it. And what you guys need to do, if you all want copies, then you need to all provide your email addresses to Greg and have him, when he gets it, to send it all out to you. But in my opinion, what they do is invaluable.
Well, they've been the one consistent thing throughout from day one. I mean, back when I was commissioner, when I met Gary and we went through this way back when, and he's been consistent.
Yeah.
There'll be another commissioner, and there'll be another commissioner, and as long as that office stays there, then we'll have that. You know, I know it's not a cheap price, but there's some value that comes with the consistency of the process. I do wish we could get rid of legal bills, because, they really do add up, but I don't know. I think in this world, they just can't do without them. It's just my own opinion.
When we get into next year, if I'm still on the board, I wouldn't mind following those dates.
Agreed.
See what,
Yeah, me too. It should be automatic, and as the auditor gets
Well,
up to speed, it'll be
whatever.
a lot simpler process.
When they get that report to the auditor, then I think, that should come to the board too.
well,
Then that way, we've got something, we know what we're looking at.
that should go on our file.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it should go in our file work.
Yeah, I think we haven't said anything to that, so we really should create a file and start, I've got stuff. It goes way back, and I've got probably more stuff, probably 10 times that amount I've gone over the years, but it's hard to.
And Mommy, I sent you the balance, but, the commissioners get the ledger. But if you guys want that 378 ledger part, I'm sure you don't want the 1,000-page ledger.
No.
But, if you just want that one fund every quarter, I would suggest that you email Greg and say every quarter, send us that one page.
That's the only one that's current, is
Yeah, it's
378.
378, and just say, send us that fund, and then you always have a running balance of what you have, of what is in it. And then you can see all the transactions also that came in and out of it.
Jane, when are those payments due?
The bond payments are due in February and August. And the trust payments are April and September. actually asked for 378 and 379 because the 379 is the sinking fund, and that's what the payments are made out of. So you'll be able to see them go into that fund and then out of that fund. So you need to ask for those two.
So we're good until February. That's been a lot of help. Thank you.
I do hope there's some continuity with the redevelopment commission, because I think that's really important.
Well, after much discussion, do we want to put anything to action? What's the thoughts of the board at this point? Get a filing cabinet. I think, yeah, Beth and I were talking about that before we started either.
Then when Ron asks for something, we'll know where to get it.
It sounds practical, but I mean, it's gonna help. I mean, if we can have some sort of dedicated access. I'll agree. I'll talk to the auditor about getting that.
Well, the auditor, we transmit all that by email and attachments. Y'all can have your own computer files, and somebody calls and asks you a question, you got it
That's true.
right there.
We could have a good central, and that was the challenge, even back when I was commissioner, it was challenging for the auditors to track all that because it was new. And if I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but there was a lot of discussion, should the auditor be responsible for this? Should we hire somebody to guide it? And it like the auditor is the secretary to the commissioners, that's an official title, but, you know, as secretary to the redevelopment commission, you know, not necessarily so. So, and it was just going to be another task. So I remember having that discussion, and we're kind of paying the price because we didn't have that.
Since that's all public information, I would even recommend emailing it to the executive director of the LEO, and he or she would keep that on, they would have that information at hand, they wouldn't have to bug you for it.
Exactly, if we could just organize it in a way that,
Yeah.
with electronics today, if we could just have electronic copies of everything, I mean, we don't even need a computer, just have an external hard drive that we can say, plug it in and update this thing. And that can be shared easily.
Yeah.
Duplicated.
Do you want to have Gary, when he prepares this information, just go ahead and call it?
That would be fun. Wouldn't be that.
We just have to make sure that this stays updated. Just mail all the correspondence. We don't just like,
Public information. I don't think it's a problem for all of that.
when we see something.
That would be some continuity, but, yeah. Yeah, I wanted you on that a little bit, so it would be fun if we could, and there may be some sort of rule regarding all that, but.
We ought to have a place to call home. I mean,
Yeah.
part of things that are approved, not drafts and things that are in orders, but once it's final, then anybody can walk in and if they needed a copy, not lose the original kind of thing. But for the board, you got to almost have the ability to have it where you can access it if you want to do it.
Yeah, and that would help Toledo as well. I mean, got a hot lead, you want to act on it, you don't want to sit around for 3 weeks until the redevelopment commission meets somehow, some way. They've got a machine, they may have machines free a computer, or certainly a file that can be dedicated to that correspondence. Would be nice.
Well, and the more of us that have it, you know, in case, who knows what happens to something, you know, there's copies of it somewhere else.
Exactly.
I mean, I've had electronics, pay lots of money for it, and I have nothing.
There's nothing confidential here at all. This is all public material, so it's not like we're exposing something that we don't know. And I can't think of any incidents, if so, we'll address that when we hit it, but I don't think that would be the case. I have original contract here. I'm skipping around, but I just realized Gary did leave a contract. We want to look at that. Make some copies for everybody. Which is electronic.
He would probably send it to you electronic.
Maybe so, get it out before we make any, take any action on that.
Can you send it out or not?
Yeah, I just said
It's
that.
just a,
Yeah.
scan it in, maybe just scan it in and send it out.
Any other thoughts or discussions? I know we've got our meeting minutes, we can go through, say we're doing everything reverse.
What were we doing with, as far as people running up our bills for us?
Do we want to draft a small formality? I don't think it has to be very complex.
Well, the thing of it is, we could tell 50 people what our policy is, but if the 51st one calls, I mean, I didn't know. So,
Well, I think we should start a number. I mean, if someone calls them, I mean, who's paying the bill and where's the authorization?
You need to send a letter to
I
Umball.
think Ron's
Explain
right,
to
let
them
them all
what-
know that, and
Anybody else while we're sending a letter? I'm all
see, I would say it gets filtered through the chairman,
I would
no matter who it is, if it's with the chairman, at least because then you know.
right. We try this, I move that we send notification to Umball and any other pertinent businesses we consult with to consult with Chairman Monty before any action is done. Charging, thank you. That helps chargeable actions. Is that okay, folks?
maybe just put it in the chair, instead of names, then
Yeah.
it can go on.
With the chair, sure. With the chairman.
Other than the contractual services that you've already.
Yeah.
I mean, like he's already doing.
Outside, outside.
Other than contractual services. Is that a place to start? Yours? describe it.
No.
No.
He's kidding.
It's all right, appreciate it.
Notification be sent.
I love to write right out until somebody's watching me, right?
Sources and approved affiliates that you do business with, other than contractual services. Validate. You're required to notify.
Outside of contractual services recognized by the RRC.
Recognized by the RDC.
Contractual services recognized.
Recognized.
I will review this. Be required to notify RDC chairman before services are performed. And especially bill. Second. Okay, okay. Let's start. Tom moved, Brad second.
All right, so took us a couple minutes, but we scrapped out a motion. I appreciate that, thank you.
That'll help.
All right, so all in favor of the board written and discussed motion, respond voicefully by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you for that.
Okay.
Now, is it a fair assumption if that would occur, that we're gonna be informed what they did? I mean, if someone would do something that's gonna be charged to us, then obviously it would be something that have to do with our business, if we're gonna pay the bill, right?
Absolutely.
I don't think that's asking
Right.
much, is it?
I mean, I don't know. I would see the executive director from the Lido, I could see them possibly needing, you know, if they need something, and they're gonna be in contact with, the chair if there's something going on. And, you know, it's the whole idea is to everybody work together on it.
We could modify this kind of thing, just read it, sure it comes.
Yeah, once that's all.
But I think that if I get the call and Gary says, hey, Monty, somebody wants to talk about this, is that okay? That's kind of, I think that's
Yeah.
my expectation, and I'm gonna say, well, I don't need to know every dirty detail, but, you know, what's the general?
Well, or it's the Lido director.
And how much time is
says,
this gonna take, I may
You
ask?
know, I've got someone interested and I need to have this kind of information.
Sure.
I
We
can't
have
find it and
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, and it might be fair to say, was that something we've done before?
Exactly.
And then you can just send them an email or a copy, or, but if it's filtered through one individual, then, you know, you can speak on behalf of the board, and you're gonna have to make that judgment.
Right, I think that's.
But we won't come into a meeting with a claim and not understand.
What
Yeah.
it is.
I'll be able to say, okay, that phone
Yeah.
call on June
Where they-
5th,
yeah.
commissioner called me, or Ludo called me, or somebody called me, and it was new information, it was something that we couldn't address and needed to be addressed.
I mean, do you remember what the dollar figure was, that bill, of like what was revised, what was taken off, how much?
Over $500.
I think we made good movement.
Well, just so we're assured that it's legitimate business.
Yeah, absolutely, sure, yeah.
Amen.
Oh, and lastly, then, do we want to do minutes?
Yes.
Since-
I handed out,
Next to lastly.
I handed out updated copies. Brad gave a very good suggestion. First of all, the type was much as anything. So, here they are.
Did you get a couple I sent you, or were you gone on
I was gone off noon.
that?
Did you want to?
Well, no, the only ones, just a couple, and this involved Brad. You guys talked about that last time, that parts. You and Beth decided that the money should come back to the RDC and not general fund.
The minutes said it was going to go back to the general fund. Now, if that's not right. we-
Well, I mean, that was discussed at the last meeting.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, said about that, because I was mistaken.
So that would have to be.
Did that get sold? Did Craig ever follow up?
No, I heard from him.
I went down there.
I've hit him up twice, and I think he just keeps forgetting or something to go down there.
Well, I talked to Jeff, and he took the parts out to the plant, I mean, he says they're really not worth anything. So he took them out to the plant in case they would need them for something. He didn't think they were a real big deal, I mean, no money maker. He said, if you got $100, you should take it.
Yeah.
And he didn't find that.
What's sad is that they were probably worth 1,200 or more, but. that's
He
the way
just
it
took them
goes.
out there in case they needed it.
Yeah,
So that's where they're at now, is at the
Yeah.
utility plant?
yes. And so Bob, I didn't get your point. It needs to be what?
Oh, well, I mean, if there would be any money back, I mean, Brad and Beth,
Go back to
you know,
the
had
tip.
discussed that it should come back to the RDC, not general fund.
Which would be
We'll make some
count,
components outside all the other normal processes.
that's what I'm saying. Which is account,
C-378.
yeah.
Well, I think that if you recall, we had discussed that if you sold it, it could be a line created miscellaneous income. And then you could use that maybe to do your
Just
bonus.
back to the tip fund, tip fund.
But
I would
I
change that to
agree
just say
that
that the sale
we're
goes
not
back
gonna
to
have
the
anything
fund.
anyway.
That's my assumption as well.
I don't think he had ever.
Yeah,
No,
I think
or
we're good, anything,
Things
so.
go get sold for copper.
You know, if you're a farm boy or something and you can just use that, I mean, I can slap that up there on one of my pieces and feel comfortable, but if I'm an electrician, if I have one little doubt, I'm not gonna do it.
No, those guys like to follow code and everything. Okay.
What else you got?
Any others?
The only other thing, where it says municipalities, for the municipalities, in the new business, it says the meeting is convened for the formality of stating there is no, and then we changed this excess,
Tax
tax
assessment.
assessed value
Mhm.
for the municipalities for 2012. It should be taxing units, because it's not just the municipalities.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
And I
that's
think
right.
that should be
Solid
for
waste.
2013,
For the taxing entities.
and then 2013.
What, you don't say tax units?
Uh,
Probably that's a better word.
Taxing units is what
Taxing
I
units.
have
Okay.
Okay,
for 2013.
yes, 2018.
That's all I saw.
Okay.
The only other little one, not even sure why this got put in again. When we're talking about the bonds issuance,
Mhm.
you said the commission was made aware that Monty and Bob were bonded.
That was just part of the discussion.
Well, no, actually what it was, Helen had asked that if anybody had it recorded. And Monty and myself and, did you have yours recorded? Because there's another voice.
Yes. I
There's
did
another
yours.
voice in the background, they don't know who it was. They thought they said theirs was recorded and mine was recorded.
Oh, everybody, but
I mean, not that, it wasn't brought up that we were bonded, but I didn't know about it.
The bonding is recorded.
I mean, I don't know if you need any of it. I just noticed that mark wasn't right.
Bonds are- Okay. Very good.
So,
All right.
Make the motion? I make the motion?
Sure.
I'm
I am
sorry.
ready, go right ahead.
Make a motion, we approve minutes of June 26, 2012 with the corrections which we did.
Second.
Motion and second then on the floor, regarding the minutes of corrections. All in favor of responding to voice vote by.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now, I guess lastly, when do we want to get back together? And get the feeling we probably want to approve this, but I would like, it's kind of a big deal, I'd like for the others to have a chance to look at it. And sometimes when I sleep on something, I might wake up in the morning with a different opinion on something as well. It's not that significant, but it's big enough bill and undertaking. We probably ought to meet towards the latter part of the year anyhow, and we'll probably have our bills paid. So, when would be a safe time to try to meet? We don't have a real urgent deadline on this other than before the end of the year, I think.
Is there any reason to wait very long?
Not that I can think of other than what any other bills might come forward, but since we're going okay with our funds, they're going forward,
until we bill, the last bill comes in. For the, what they have to do for the assessed value.
I bet we have that by the first of December.
Yeah.
The taxes are going out. They better have them.
They're going out.
Because the county needs the money.
I think it's gonna be on time.
On time? Good,
That's what we're working at.
good.
So, the first week of December is Monday's the 3rd. Probably make, anybody have anything we need to work around that first week? Through the 7th?
At this point in time, I don't know, but.
I have my work schedule up to them, and I just don't have it with me. I think I'm off somewhere in that. I know I'm off.
Sounds good.
But I think I'm off.
Well, let's try to have a meeting right in the middle of that, huh? Is there something we need to work around? Yeah.
You want us to like email you dates and you want to set it
Okay.
one and just see if it works with everybody?
Yeah, I mean, let's work around your schedule, and once it's set, then we can plan our schedules around you.
Oh, that's all right.
What date did you suggest?
I know, because I know I'm off that first
Okay,
week, so.
well, we kind of got an email thing going on, so I mean, if
We
you
do
want to,
that.
get a chance next day or two to let us
I will.
know what's working.
I will.
Shall we shoot somewhere for that first week of
That first week
December?
of December.
Take a look at it, and then we'll
Set
have plenty of
our
time.
next meeting for.
No.
You guys might go on and see that you have some sort of council action or something else to work around, so.
For myself, but I haven't myself.
That's,
Yeah.
Just, I guess that could.
Hey, Jane. The minutes over in the auditor's office have not been there for about a year. Swear to God, I came in to put some minutes in, second shelf at the bottom where it used to be.
The ones that you had organized.
Well, I actually had not organized as much as that there had just been a notebook there, and I had put one set in, was gonna add more. I can't imagine. You haven't, I'm not using them.
I've been in there.
Check with Helen, but I haven't taken them.
Do you have copies?
Not some of the early stuff, I don't think, but I've got everything last 2 years, 2.5 years. Put it around.
Yeah, great.
I had,
You did.
When did you,
and then I was in again the other, I was in 3 days ago, to see if anybody found it.
where were they in the office?
Well, the shelf has been moved in the auditor's office,
Yeah.
and it was on the south wall, second shelf from the bottom, because I pulled it out a couple times to look and contribute.
Did you move that shelf in there?
The shelf has been moved, but
You didn't move it?
I looked at the books all over the office.
So they were in the auditor's private office?
Yes. And I was in there days after he took over.
And they were gone then?
Yeah, yeah. And he would have had anything to do with that. But it's off the record. This is
Oh,
just.
it's on there.
If it's on the record.
It's record,
It's on the
well.
Move to adjourn.
I move we adjourn. Second.
Got a motion and a second to adjourn. Any opposition to that? All right. Consider all this meeting closed.
I don't care.
That's
I'm going to find him.
Vermont, I mean, really, that's. Yeah, fine. I mean, that's really long.
It absolutely is. That's why I.
The cabinetry room, is it there? Is it there?
Well, there's 3 or 4 cabinets that size.
They gotta be laying somewhere, somebody moved them and set it down, they got stuff on them.
I think so too.
It
I'm
doesn't
not
matter.
worried, it's just that I have been there twice.
What about, did you ask him if it was,
Yes.
They're in a box or a stack of something,
they were
so.
in a folder?
I'm trying to find.
No, it was a binder.
Possibly.
Can't remember if it was around the deck.
Well, we're good.
Anyway,
big shame.
Reminder or something?
Well, dang it, I logged it.
Oh, well, what?
I have no clue.
I was really thinking, you know,
Well,
I can remember
I said
that.
Gail Brown, Gail put a piece together
hard
for
drives
us
with,
with a big copy of it, 50 cents a year, so
Put it
I
on
may
there.
have.
I was trying to think of probably, let's say, it's something,
The brown
let's say I
sauce
want,
line?
it's like maybe I have,
I got stuff on
I
the.
took home with me and downloaded a bunch of files on it and brought it back.
You know, Parsons.
Probably I want to fill it out.
Did it have a label
I guess I
like
can
on
go
the-
home and tamper with it.
like on
Yeah.
On the
Don't
edge?
always have that.
It's so easy to remember, like,
But I know, I didn't, that's part of the sin, I didn't think that.
Go Ron, you gotta go eat.
I did it.
You can't, you ate first.
May first, yeah.
I was in India, I got back to town at 10 till 6.
This is the last
I
time.
had my priorities
Oh,
picture.
after you had your meeting in July or June, did you put it on?
Before that, I was-
about a
And they
year
were not
after
there
I
then?
was done, I saved some of this stuff, and I was glad I did.
They did.
That's what you're supposed to
Because I went to,
You know, my great grandchildren don't need it.
I had all the copies of the notices of no,
Now, this is the way it's going to work Republican,
and
you
you
just
and
go
I
eat your food.
signed it, like, hand delivered because
And
the
don't,
day before.
people might think you're Republican if you're there, Bob.
You know,
I can probably get you a hat with an elephant resolution.
It might be something that could well turn into a Republican too, so you
it's really a, it's redundant, because we
Benefit
generate
from
so
health
much
was
stuff.
found.
I don't think they'll mistake me for all.
I came in to get that copy.
That's when they were on.
I don't do that anymore.
So that was the
Girls
second
there,
time I said, hey, let's
yeah,
go to
but
that
that's
again.
key. They got a
but I do get that resolution.
and a balance.
I don't think it's bad.
They fell through, they were looking at it.
Were they there after your January?
It's in that box with, that's gonna be our file.
Were they there after your January meeting? After your first
So,
meeting? They weren't there then after
I
your
don't
first?
know, it's
I
over a year.
thought so.
It's been over a year. And it made me so sad. It really made me, I don't know, I was gonna ask you to tell them.
No, I've never. Issues like that.
Guess we're adjourned.
I mean, I've.
Guess so.